Welcome to the Equine Vet Connect Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Carter. I'm a veterinarian and a farrier. The goal of this podcast is to educate horse people, break things down, bust myths, and keep it real. Speaking of breaking things down, here's my legal disclaimer to keep my attorney and insurance company happy. While I am a vet, I may not be your vet. Contact them before trying anything you hear on this podcast. Remember, just because you watched it on YouTube or heard it on a podcast does not mean you can do it. Please use common sense. Welcome back to the Equine Vet Connect Podcast. I'm Dan Carter. We're here at Countryside Equine Hospital in the studio, or treatment room 1. We got a special guest today. We got Miss Lucy Ray. She's with the Morgan County Extension Service. So today, we're going to not be so much medical. We're going to talk about a question that comes up a lot in day-to-day as we're out and about talking to people with horses. People are always asking about grass management and pasture management. And one of the things I tell people is I always explain your best resource for managing pastures, your best resource for grass management is your county extension agent. And do you know what the number one question I get asked, Miss Lucy, is?
What's that, Dan?
What's the county extension agent? So we're going to solve that question today.
Sure.
So, Miss Lucy, let's talk about what a county extension agent is, what all y'all bring to the table, how the extension service works, and like one of the greatest resources for managing your pastures in anything agriculture. I like to say from azaleas to soybeans to cattle to pasture, whatever, you got the answer. So what is the county extension service?
I don't know how to handle such a wonderful lead in there. But yes, and I like to say, if we don't have the answers, we'll definitely find out.
Yes.
Because not one person cannot be a expert in everything. But the great thing about the extension service is that we do have specialists in every department that can act as that specialty resource for us. So to kind of go back to your initial question, the extension service is something that exists all over the country, and in every state it looks a little different. And each state has a land-grant university that is funded, and extension is the arm of that university out in the county. So here in Georgia, we have 159 counties. We have a county extension office in every county, and that office is a partnership between the University of Georgia and the county government that funds the forage and youth program, which is what most people have heard of when they talk about extension or they hear about extension, a family and consumer science program, and arguably, since we do support Georgia's largest industry is agriculture, arguably a large majority of those agents are ag agents. And so we support whatever agriculture looks like in that county. So in Fulton County, for example, your job as an ag agent is going to be very, very different than your job in Crisp County.
Mm-hmm.
So, as an extension agent in Morgan County, we have a lot of a wide variety of agriculture, and a wide variety of commodities grown. So, I work with homeowners on their azaleas, like you like to say, their azaleas, their tomatoes, yard and turf questions, pasture management for cattle, horses, sheep, alpacas, gotten some pasture questions regarding ostriches a couple of times. And then we also grow wheat, soybeans, corn, cotton, and we have 5 dairies left in the county. So it's kind of a wide variety. And so you can see by me kind of explaining what we cover that it's really impossible for one person to be an expert at everything. Every extension agent kind of has their strong suit and their strong point, but we have those extension specialists that are completely University of Georgia funded that we can call for resources and information.
Let's back that up a little bit.
Sure.
When you talked about the land grant university, a lot of people don't realize, like the University of Georgia, that was set up when the state was first became a state. I mean, we all the way back to statehood.
So the land grant university system, I believe, was started in 1862.
Okay, so a little after we became a state.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, sorry. It sounded really cool,
It
though.
did sound really cool.
But the need for education arose.
Yes.
And so the states being not having a lot of money, the universities that was given huge chunks of land all over the state and said, use this to fund the university. And your primary mission is agricultural research, education, and extension.
Absolutely.
Because if we don't eat,
everything goes downhill from there.
Yeah, the physics program is really cool, and the engineering program is really cool. But if we don't eat, we're not worried about engineering.
Exactly. So. I was listening. If you've got lots of food, you've got lots of problems. If you don't have any food, you've got one problem.
That's it. So y'all, the extension service was that effort, that wing of the land grant university to take research that was at the university and get that out to the people out in the community.
Yep. And so Cooperative Extension was founded in 1912. You're going to need to fact check me on that, and I can come back and say that again. Okay, cool.
Well,
but so fact check me on that, because I know I was there for the 100-year anniversary, but I can't remember if it was 1910 or 1912.
Close enough. It was 100 years ago. Let's go with that. 100 plus years ago.
So over 100 years ago, Cooperative Extension was started and founded. And if you think about 100 years ago, our mobility was very different. The internet wasn't here. It was a lot harder to get information out into the general
nobody
public.
was podcasting.
Nobody was podcasting 100 years ago.
How did they get information?
I know, hard to believe, right?
Yes.
So we, the extension you had a county agent in every county, that was basically responsible for taking that research, that agricultural research, and sharing it with farmers. So you think about kind of what our issues were then. Crop rotation that we don't ever think twice about now.
Right.
Was kind of a big thing then. Erosion, tillable soils, and even things as simple, that we still do today. What varieties work best in what parts of the state? That's a big thing that we do in extension, and bringing that back to horses and pastures. The University of Georgia has research experiment stations. They have specialists that do on-farm trials. So we're looking at different varieties of alfalfa that do better here in the South, and handle our humid environment a little better. We're looking at varieties of Bermuda grass, for example, that are going to flourish up in Calhoun, and in North Georgia. And we're looking for varieties of fescue that can come farther south, so that we've got more choices and more options in our forages in general. So a lot of cool stuff that kind of happens behind the scenes that enable folks like you and I to say, all right, this is what you need to do on your operation, on your horse farm, or with your animals.
Because that's a big thing that we get questioned on, and that's kind of where I want to go today is, we have people moving to the area. They decide, I'm going to get horses. I'm going to have a horse farm. Or people build a boarding facility, build a training facility, and it's like, okay, we've got this. And people have a lot of knowledge in horses, but I found this out, like raising cattle. I'm not in the cattle business. I'm in the grass business.
100%.
I grow grass.
100%.
And so the same thing is, the whole goal is let the horses harvest the grass. So you're not harvesting the grass and bringing it to them. So people
cheaper
are always
that way.
What's that?
Cheaper that way.
It's always cheaper that way.
Yeah.
And they're built for it, and they like doing it.
So there you go.
They would
don't
much
charge you for it.
No,
there's no delivery fee.
Yeah, they'd much rather go harvest that grass because it just tastes better. And so people are always asking, like, all right, I've got this horse farm. Now what? So let's talk a little bit about, you've bought a property. You're ready. You're going to move your horses out there. And let's go through a year in the life of a pasture.
Okay.
Let's talk about, right now it's, what would be a good time of year to start?
So first of all, let's kind of start on our planting situation, and let's get a few things, kind of the things that nobody likes to think about or talk about, kind of there on the table. So first of all, realize that you're planning. You're planning for something that, like you said, there's a year, there's a season. It's not as simple as you buy your 10 acres and in March and your horses are there in April.
Right.
Not if you're starting from scratch. Because you do have that growing season. The other thing that I like to focus on, and tell people so that you are planning out your situation for your operation is the thing that no one likes to talk about, and that's stocking rate. So
Yes.
if you are planning on your grass being your main source of nutrition and of forage for your horses, the ratio in Georgia is 1 horse per 2.5 to 3 acres of grass. And that's of grass. That doesn't get to count your house. That doesn't count your yard. That doesn't count the trees that are in your pasture that provide shade for that animal. It's 2.5 to 3 acres of grass. And that allows that horse to have enough of a forage base on a year to have that be the majority of their diet. And
one of the things I've seen is kind of a good rule of thumb, too. If you've got 10 acres, and I have looked at this numerous times, if you've got 10 acres, you can guarantee you're going to burn 2 acres of that in the house and dwelling. So even if you got 10 acres of field, just if you're looking at a field, you're going to buy 10 acres in a field and build a house. Just accept the bare minimum you're going to have around that house is 2. And I have looked at this every which way you can. It's 2 acres. If you have 10, you're going to burn 2. And you're like, I'm not going to have much yard. If you have any yard in the house,
it tends to grow a little faster than you think it does, or it gets a little bigger than you.
Yeah,
or you add a shed or a shop or a chicken coop or
I
what
need a
have
place
you.
to put my horse trailer.
There, exactly.
I got to park a truck.
Maybe I want to put an arena in there real fast. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, without the arena, you're 2 acres. You add an arena, you're burning 3.
I'm not going to argue that at all.
So if you buy 10, count on 7. That's if you're very conservative.
And so some of those things, planning that out and thinking about that ahead of time, I think really helps and deals with the frustration. And so I try to make that point to folks that come to me and ask for help planning out a farm, or they bought property or they're looking at property in the county. And, and sometimes the response is, well, I'm going to be buying feed and hay. I'm not worried about having my grass provide nutrition for my horses. So my answer to that is that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Everybody has to run their facility, their operation in the way that works for them. However, you don't get to call and cuss your county agent because there's not grass in your pastures when you have 17 horses on 7 acres.
And I want to talk about this too. Grass is always the best forage. And when I talk to people about nutrition all the time, we talk horses consume 2.5% of body weight a day. The whole goal is to have less than 1% of that as some type of a feed. So that means the biggest thing your horse consumes is forage. And obviously you want the absolute best forage money can buy, because that's the bulk of your diet. And the best forage will always be fresh grass. If you think about it, when we talk about vegetables, the best vegetables for us is fresh vegetables. The second best is like frozen or canned. But your horse is made to eat grass.
So let me ask you a question then, from a veterinarian perspective. Is there a difference in the health issues you see on grass versus hay?
I would say yes.
Okay.
When you start getting in, so colic's the number one thing I think we make a difference in. Hay is a dehydrated product. Okay. And our biggest thing in horses is hydration. If you want to prevent colic, if you want to do everything in your power to prevent colic, hydration. So if horses are consuming a dehydrated product, it has to get rehydrated before they're going to process it. So that means once it's a GI tract, it's got to get rehydrated. That means we have to consume more water. So you've got normal water consumption just to live. when you start adding in a dry hay product, well, now we need more water because that hay's got to get rehydrated. What's like when we cut hay, when you cut grass, what's the average moisture content in grass?
Before I cut it,
Let's say you cut it, it landed on the ground. You were to test the moisture. What is that?
above 60%. Because I'm waiting for it to dry down to 60 to even wrap it in baleage, which is a higher moisture content product than hay. And I want it below 15%. I want it 15 to 18% in a hay product.
So you're talking about 50% of the weight of that hay is moisture.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about the amount of moisture that puts in, so if a horse is eating 20 pounds of grass a day, he's getting 10 pounds of water.
Mm-hmm.
If he's eating 20 pounds of hay, he needs an additional 10 pounds of water.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about that, water's 8 pounds per gallon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an extra 1.5 gallons a day if we're on a dry hay diet that we've got to consume.
That's a very good point.
And so, and I can tell you the number one thing to prevent impaction, water. So,
which is why you see more colics in the winter when they don't want to drink as much.
Correct. And they're also consuming hay.
More hay in the winter.
So we've got decreased water consumption because it's cold.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've got a product that we're feeding that requires a higher water consumption. And so starting about November, we're going to treat a whole lot of colics from November through about April-ish.
When the grass comes out.
And the grass comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So again, grass, best nutrition out there. If you're going to feed forage, grass.
And like you said earlier, you're in the grass business.
Yes.
You're in the grass. And so if you can change your mindset a little bit on that, and either, buy enough land for the horses that you have or keep your horses to a number where, where you're looking at that 2.5 to 3 acres per animal.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really, really helps. And I, there's always caveats. There's always different things to look at. I've got some horses at my place that get fat off of breathing. So there is, doesn't mean you can't build a dry lot and you don't have those options. But if you protect that investment that you put into your pasture, then you've got that option. It's another tool in your toolbox. And it's, like you said, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than hay and feed.
It's healthier.
Yes, and it's
healthier.
It's cheaper. It's healthier. So there's really not a downside to doing that.
Not really. Not really. And one of the things we'll talk about, like we'll kind of segue into is, we say it's at 2 to 3 acres per horse. Mm-hmm. One of the big things that plays a role in how many acres you need per horse is going to be how well your grass is managed.
Absolutely.
So where does it start?
So, Dr. Dennis Hancock, who was our former forage extension specialist here at the University of Georgia, was very fond of saying 2 things. Number one is grass grows grass. Mm-hmm. So if you think about your soil level, whatever is going on above the ground is also going on above the ground, or below the ground, excuse me. Whatever's going on above the ground is going on below the ground. So your stems, your leaves, everything, the taller that's getting above ground, the deeper your root system is getting. So how you do that is very important. So managing all of that is very important. The other thing that Dr. Hancock was very, very fond of saying is thou shalt soil test. So it all starts with the soil test. In case you did not read your 10 commandments, there's an 11th one. Your 11th commandment is thou shalt soil test.
Gabe Brown talks about this. He's a big regenerative ag guy. And he said, all right, if you're in the cattle business, you're in the grass business.
Absolutely.
If you're in the grass business, you're in the soil business.
Absolutely.
If you maintain soil health, you will grow grass. If you grow grass, you're going to have cattle. So absolutely soil test.
Absolutely. So, and yeah, it's a, again, if you can change your mindset and your focus to that part. So if we're kind of going back and looking at maybe a year, so you start with your soil test.
When do we need to do that?
So it really doesn't matter what time of year. It needs to be the same time every year.
Right.
Because that way you're kind of comparing apples to apples.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I personally like to soil test in January or so.
Yep.
Things slow down a little bit. I've got time to get out there and look at stuff and kind of make some plans for the spring. So every extension office is going to have a little bit different price on soil test because shipping is going to factor into what the lab charges us. Here at the Morgan County Extension Office, it's $8. I don't know when the last time you tried to go buy fertilizer was, but I promise you it's more than $8. So,
and this is a simple thing to do. You can do it yourself.
Absolutely.
You don't have to have any kind of specialized tools.
Nope. You can come borrow tools from our office if you need to. But you really just need a spade or a shovel. We have a core tool at the office that we loan out with a deposit so that you bring it back.
Yep.
But you want to go about 10 places in an area in a pasture, and go at least 4 inches deep.
Mm-hmm.
So in those 10 random places, mix all that soil together in a bucket, bring it to me in a Ziploc bag. We'll put it in one of our soil sample bags and send it off and let you know what you've got. So a few things to note on that. You are going to have to notate a crop to us.
Okay.
And that crop doesn't get to be just grass because we have lots of different types of grass. So.
And you know what kind of
you
grass.
Know what kind of grass.
And if you're unsure what kind of grass, you're
talk to your county agent.
Your county agent.
Yep. And the other thing is we can run a code. We can run 5 codes at one time. So if you come to me and say, you know what, Lucy, I don't know what I want to plant here. Let's look at Bermuda grass hay. Let's look at Bahia grass hay. Let's look at a fescue pasture. Let's look at some ryegrass. I can run all those codes. The soil, what's in the soil doesn't change. My recommendations for each of those crops are going to change. So you're getting something that's very, very tailored to what you want to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And if we run that test in January, you call me back in March and say, you know what, Lucy, I don't like horses. We're not going to grow grass. I want to grow blueberries. Then all I have to do is go into that system, change my code to blueberries. It spits out a entirely different set of recommendations. No charge for that. You already paid for your soil test. So, again, it's just one of the most efficient, economical tools. And I'm going to tell a quick story, and hopefully she won't listen to this podcast and know I'm talking about her. But I had a client who was raising and rehabbing off the track thoroughbreds.
Mm-hmm.
And she stayed after me for, I guess a period of 6 to 8 months. Can you just tell me what to put on my pastures? Tell me what to put on my pastures. We had a conversation over and over and over and over about if you'll just soil test. Yeah, but I just want to know what's wrong. I just want to know, what would be a good basic fertilizer? So I think it did take close to 8 months before she ever pulled a soil sample and brought it to the office. Guess what? She didn't need anything.
No fertilizer needed.
No. Mm-mm.
And fertilizer, for those of you that aren't buying fertilizer on the regular, it's not cheap.
No.
Fertilizer costs have gone up 5 or 6 fold in the last 2 years.
Yep. This is not. It is no. It was definitely more than $8.
Yeah. Well, another thing that goes into that is your pH.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's critical to know because
Absolutely.
You can dump all the fertilizer you want if your pH is off.
Then you're not gonna the grass is not gonna be able to use it.
Right.
Your weeds might, so you might be fertilizing your weeds.
You can grow some root weeds.
Yeah, but so if we look at, soil test is going to be our beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I also really recommend if you are buying a horse property or going to look at a horse property or trying to get your pastures in shape, look at what your weed pressure is.
Mm-hmm.
So our economic threshold is if we have 30% of the pasture is weeds, then it makes sense to spray economically to try to kill those weeds. And there are other ways to kill weeds as well. Spraying is typically the most economical.
Mm-hmm.
There are weeds that can be controlled just by mowing. Diesel fuel is also not cheap, so it kind of.
I always say it's a multimodal approach to
Absolutely.
weed control. It's a combination of spraying, it's a combination of good grazing practices, and it's a combination of mowing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've got good plants, they'll drown out weed pressure too.
We call that integrated pest management.
Integrated pest, yes, I like it. Integrated pest management.
So we look at. There's a lot of different things that kind of go into that, but and back to your point too, keeping that pH correct is really the key. So if you are like some of us and you're operating on a limited budget, And you can say, well, my fertilizer is going to run me $600 a ton. My lime's going to run me $50 a ton or $65 a ton spread out. And you look at what you need per acre, etc. But if I've only got money for one, I want to go with my lime, because
I agree.
that way you've got your soil pH where you need it to be, and you've given that grass the best chance possible to drown out those weeds.
Well,
So,
it is amazing when you control pH, what that can do for weed pressure.
absolutely.
It's really incredible.
It really is.
And the great thing is too, like once you've got the soil test,
Mm-hmm.
you know what you need to do.
Yep.
You can actually use some of these custom farm services, and it's as simple as, here's my soil test.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, okay. And they come out with a truck,
Mm-hmm.
and they do everything for you.
Yep.
Or they can talk to the agent,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get your spreader out
Mm-hmm.
and go do it yourself.
Absolutely.
And you know what to put when you know your application rate.
Absolutely.
You're not wasting.
Nope.
Because that's a big thing to me, is when we start wasting fertilizer, it's not just the cost, but that fertilizer is going somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And water runoff.
Yep. So that's one of the big things. When you look at a lot of the regulations that are out there from the EPA, is you're looking at nitrogen runoff, and you're looking at phosphorus runoff into streams and into water sources. And even if you're not close to a stream, eventually that's going into groundwater. So above a certain rate, you risk contamination of that groundwater.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, soils and your layers of soils are filtering most of that out. But again, that's just another reason you don't want to over apply.
Yep.
So
weed pressure, and that's, to me, I always think about my weeds. I think spring and fall on weed control.
Typically. So, and if I'm listing things in order, I want to do a soil test first so that we know what we're working with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to figure out what our weed pressure is. And here's the other part of that. You can't just walk into the extension office and say, hey, I have weeds. I need to know what those weeds are. So the county agent can either come out and do a site visit, walk pastures, look at what weeds you have, what the pressure is. Because a lot of folks I'm not really sure if this is 30% of my pasture or not.
Right.
So there's always the option for site visits, which by the way are free.
You've already paid for them.
Yeah.
Your tax dollars, this is where you can get some of your tax dollars back.
Right? I'm telling you, the amount of people that have told me, I think you're the only thing I've ever seen for my tax dollars.
Exactly. And that's the great thing. You call them up, and y'all need calls.
Yeah.
Y'all, this is what gets you out of bed in the morning. You get to get up, go out, and do a site visit.
Absolutely.
You really and truly enjoy this.
Different every day.
Yes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Come out, walk your pastures. Like, Miss Lucy, I don't know how many times I've had you like, I got weeds in my pasture. What do I need to do? And here comes Miss Lucy out. She's looking at my pasture, and she's like, because I don't know one weed from another. I'll just be real honest. I'm a vet. I'm not an agronomist. I'm slowly trying to learn them, and I'm hoping like Google Lens helps me a lot. And half the time I'm like sending Miss Lucy a picture like, what's this? What do I need to do?
There you go. There's horsetail, or there's horse nettle, or there's catchweed bedstraw. I want to be the person that names the weeds.
They come up with some interesting ones.
Really do.
Like coffee weed.
Yeah.
It does not look like coffee.
No.
Coffee weed.
But
pigweed.
Yeah.
I hate pigweed. I don't know why it's pigweed.
Foxtail. Oh, I hate foxtail. Foxtail's the devil.
Foxtail kind of looks like a fox's tail, though. Once it seeds out.
Foxtail looks like the devil.
Yes, I agree.
Just saying.
I agree.
But
and so knowing what you've got, because there's times that you can control that, and there's times you can't.
Absolutely. If you're spraying pigweed, for example, after it's about 3 inches tall, all you're doing is making yourself feel better and spending money.
Mm-hmm.
Because it may make it mad, it'll make it curl up, it'll make it sick. It's not going to kill it.
Well, and that's an important thing to realize is like used to we could kill pigweed with Roundup, glyphosate, and so much pigweed's been sprayed with glyphosate.
It's just the same thing that you deal with in the veterinary profession, where you're looking at antibiotic resistance. We're looking at resistance to herbicides. To herbicides as well.
And so spraying at the wrong time, that's an important thing, because I know there's times you've told me it's like you missed your window to spray.
Absolutely. And if you're spraying, you're not only are you wasting money, you're making the plant mad, not doing anything, but you are contributing to that resistance.
Exactly. So that's an important thing for people to realize.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always hear is, Grazon will save your soul.
Yeah.
You can spray Grazon, it kills everything. Well, Yeah, but just like antibiotics, I can grab one of these big high-powered antibiotics, but maybe I don't need to turn that loose on that particular case because I need to reserve that one.
Well, and I understand that, but again, Grazon doesn't kill everything.
Exactly.
Like it's not I mean it gets a wide variety of weeds, but you know, Grazon's also going to kill only your broadleaf weeds, and it's not going to kill all of your broadleaf weeds. Your timing's appropriate. It's got to be appropriate. It's not going to touch foxtail. So knowing what weeds you have and what the best chemical choice is for that. So we have a huge chemical handbook that every county office in the state has got one. Because it's impossible to know everything, but we have the resources to find out for you. So typically you have different windows to control different weeds. Spring and fall, kind of like you said, if we're kind of narrowing it down. So a lot of times in that November to January range, and then again in February to April range. There's some weeds that are best sprayed, May, June. So just kind of knowing what you've got and when to spray. And, cedar weed or dog fennel, for example, running a mower over that late August will give you about 85% control. So with one mowing, other weeds are going to take multiple mowings. So it's just, again, figuring out what you've got and what your plan is. So I guess kind of my common theme here is between the soil test and the weeds is know what you have first, and that way you can develop a plan.
So it's almost like when I practice medicine, the best thing I can do for you is get you an accurate diagnosis. Because once we have that, then it's real simple to go treat.
Yep.
And because I know I remember one year, and this was a very expensive mistake I made. I started seeing weeds. So I did what anybody would do. I calibrated my sprayer, which
we can also help you come do, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I'm usually sitting there on YouTube trying to remember how to do this and get my sprayer calibrated. Here I go. It's March. I'm spraying like crazy. You know what I didn't figure? Soil temp. My soil temp was too low. So I went out and sprayed all my weeds. 2 weeks later, I ain't killing any weeds because my soil temp was not right. If I'd have waited 2 or 3 weeks, my soil temperature had been where it needed to be, and my spray would have actually been effective. So I just sprayed a bunch of chemical that wasn't effective. So that cost me money. And then I also contributed to resistance because it wasn't effective. And also at that point in time, we've got a saying that surgery's trauma, medicine's poison, and alternatives are witchcraft, absent a diagnosis. So if you really think about it, I turned a great product, which was a weed killer, really into just a toxin because it wasn't applied correctly, and it just ran off and did nothing. And
wasted your time.
Wasted my time, my money. I mean, that's a day I wasn't getting back.
Yep.
And that's money I'm not getting back. And if I just asked my agent, they'd have been like, hey, maybe let's wait till the soil temp warms up.
And we're always a phone call away too, because, March is going to be different every year. We had stuff sprouting in February that we normally didn't see until the end of March this year. And then we had some cool rainy weather. And so, it's a little bit of a balancing act. So you can put together a calendar of what you should do when, but also realize that Mother Nature doesn't always read that calendar.
Well, that was my thing. It's like, it's March.
It's March.
We spray.
Yeah.
But I didn't. And what should have dawned on me was I was out there in my hoodie in March calibrating my sprayer. Like, ding, ding, ding. Maybe it's a little chilly.
We should wait a second. Crabgrass doesn't germinate till soil temperature.
Exactly. And it's like, how did that come up? Oh, soil temperature. So again, and like you said, controlling dog fennel, good mowing in August.
Yep.
And so that first year of owning that property, like probably going to see you a lot, and you can kind of work through them, quarterly visits just to kind of get a plan put together.
Absolutely.
Spraying at the right time, fertilizing at the right time, mowing at the right time.
Yep. And sometimes too, and I'm gonna throw that in there. Like if you've already got grass established, then that's kind of what we're doing. if you're wanting to establish a pasture from scratch, then realize realistically, you're not grazing it that first year.
No.
Because you're letting that root system we talked about earlier develop, and you're letting that grass get established. And if you start overgrazing it, then you spent a lot of money renovating a pasture that you just killed.
Well, and that's an important thing. I always think about the leaf of my plant like a solar panel.
Absolutely. That's a great way to think about it.
And that solar panel's whole job is just like a solar panel in the house makes electricity. That solar panel on my grass is there to make roots. And roots, an easy way I like to think about that is let's think about the almighty potato. That tater is where it's like, it's not, it didn't make that so we can have a delicious baked potato. It made it so it can store energy to live. It's a root. It's a tuber. And your grass does the same thing. It just doesn't look like a tater. It's storing all that energy underground. And that's something too, like the better root system you can build, the more water it can get to.
Yes.
So when drought hits in July, you've got really deep roots and you've got a better chance of surviving that drought.
We get a 7-degree day like we did over Christmas a couple of years ago, and those roots are down there, and you can survive those cold temperatures too.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So that's a big thing that we try to, you think about Bermuda grass, for example. A lot of times we're dry by the end of the summer. Those roots are stressed. A lot of times we want to give it a little potash or potassium, help root development, and that helps it get through the cold winter as well.
So again, I always think I'm like everybody else. I think, all right, I've sprayed my weeds in March. My fertilizer is going out
June or so, June.
I'm bad to like to put it out a little bit earlier.
Depends on what you're fertilizing. If it's Bermuda or if it's fescue or.
And so I didn't even, the thought of fertilizing in late summer, early fall never crossed my mind. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah. And you don't, and you only need part of that fertilizer, because every fertilizer, if you think about 10, 10, 10, it's looking at the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. That's what those numbers correlate to. So,
I guess you kind of know which one of those numbers you need based on a soil test.
Based on your soil test. Look at that.
So
go back to that $8 soil test.
$8 soil test.
Yeah.
And like that's the other thing. If you got a 10-acre pasture, I mean, you go hit what you said, 10, 12 spots.
Yeah.
And mix it up, run them one test.
Absolutely. Because you really, even if you've got that 10 acres split up into 3 smaller paddocks, realistically, you're not gonna have a truck come do different things for each pasture. You're gonna have a truck over your entire property. So, one soil test lets you know what you're doing over your entire property there.
And getting those roots established, that kind of leads into that. This is the beautiful thing about Georgia that I love about Georgia. We can grow something here around here. We don't have that white. Well, occasionally we get some of that white stuff. They get up north, but we also don't have this thing called freezing of the ground. And so if you're managing properly and you're looking to save that, you can actually go in and plant some winter grazing for your horses as well.
Absolutely. And kind of where we are in Georgia, we're in that sweet spot because we've got a lot of the warm season grasses that folks farther up closer to the Tennessee line, they don't do as well growing as much Bermuda as we do here. Because we can grow Bermuda. Apparently we can now grow Bahia. And I'm a big fan of ryegrass.
I like rye.
I'm just number one because I don't have a green thumb, and it can grow on a rock. If the rock got a little bit of dirt, it grows in my truck bed.
It does.
Yeah.
I have seen seeds spilled on concrete, and you come back a few weeks later, you got ryegrass 6 inches tall. I mean, it's going to grow.
It is. So
it's going to grow.
It is really. I mean, you're the expert on this, but it's really a good forage for horses. I think sometimes it gets a little bit of a bad rep because it's very nutritious, but it's a good.
I tell people, if you look at hay we grow in Georgia, a well-cut rye is probably one of the best hays we grow from a nutrient content.
Yeah.
And the other thing I will tell you is I have watched horses walk away from alfalfa to go eat good cut rye. Now, cut right. And there's a difference, too, when you're even looking at rye. Like, rye for cattle looks different than rye for horses as far as how it's cut and baled.
Well,
when it's cut.
And I think that's our biggest thing, too. So speaking of tests that we do at the Extension office, we can also test your forage. and test your hay and let you know what the nutrient quality of that
Can I just say
is.
the hay test I probably talk about hay testing every week because people are always like, well, what do I feed my horse? So I was like, okay, well, let's talk about your number one thing that you're feeding your horse, which is forage. That should be, my goal is to have that close to 2% of body weight.
Absolutely.
As a part of the diet, because that's what they're made to eat.
Mm-hmm.
The grain should supplement what your hay doesn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's hard to know what your hay doesn't have if you don't
test your hay.
Test your hay.
Yeah. Funny how that works. Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, we can run a forage test through the extension office, and like our basic is not going to tell you minerals. It's going to tell you crude protein, your digestibility, your total digestible nutrients. It's going to tell you the amount of moisture,
starch content, carbohydrate content, type of fiber.
So all of
that's what we need.
All of that kind of stuff is, if you can tell me what you want tested, then we have a test for it. It's not just as simple as running a water test, a soil test, or we've got our basics, but if there are specifics that you want included, we can run a mineral test on your forages as well. So I mean, that's huge. Knowledge is power, right? Like the more you know, if you, like you said earlier, if you've got that diagnosis, then.
Well, and that's one of the things when it comes to hay testing. I've argued. So a few jobs ago, I was in the ruminant nutrition. I was a cattle nutritionist. And one of the things that I've always thought is, hay should be sold instead of, like, everyone wants to look at hay and say, oh, that's good hay. I've looked at hay that's some good looking hay, and tested it and be like, well, this is the iceberg lettuce of hay. It doesn't even look great, but it's got zero nutrient density. And I've looked at other hay and it's like, wow, that doesn't look real great. Tested it, and the digestibility's off the charts. Crude protein's off the charts.
Absolutely.
It's fantastic.
That's one of my favorite demos. I'm on the UGA forage team, which is a set of agents across the state that kind of focus a lot on forages and pastures. And that's one of my favorite demonstrations to do at a field day, is to have some really rough looking hay that tests really well and some really pretty looking hay.
Yep.
And then color's another thing, because I mean, last time I checked, there's not really a whole lot of nutrients associated with the color green. I think it's vitamin A, is it?
That's about it. And it's going to be kind of limited in hay anyway, because vitamins they're not the best at hanging around after we.
Gotcha. So, and also, I don't know that horses care what color the hay is in general. Really. So, I had a professor in graduate school that used to say, and he was my forages professor, so he very much was a proponent of testing your hay, because that's the way that you know. And he gave us a test question at one point, asking for what you needed to assess visually. And we had talked about in class looking at softness, looking at presence of foreign materials in your hay, and things of that nature. Because really, if you think about it, softness is going to equate to more leaf content versus stem, which is going to then equate back to something that is younger. Anytime you have a more immature, younger forage, it's going to have higher nutrient value. So we kind of talked about some ways to visually assess in a situation where you're not able to run a test, or if you're, and I'll never forget, one of the folks in the class wrote down as his answer that was hay that was visually pleasing, was hay that you could roll around naked in.
He's not wrong there.
I mean, Dr. Hufflin gave him full credit.
He's not wrong, because that's a softer hay.
This is softer hay. It doesn't have foreign materials or sticks in it.
Well, and that, and going back to that, I've always said, no, this is never going to happen. But to me, like, I've always thought there ought to be a premium paid if your hay is of good quality on a test.
It should.
And there should be a discount if it's poor quality.
Well, and I'll tell you, a lot of my cattle producers are doing that. If it's we'll just say $55 for a roll of hay. Like, I've got a lot of guys now that'll call and say, I want a test pulled on this. And if it's below a certain nutrient profile, they're going to go back to the producer and be like, look, dude, I'm going to have to feed more of this. I'm going to have to supplement with other feed for this. And so I'm not going to pay this for it. If you want to drop it down, we'll talk about it. But it has become a price negotiation point there. So for some of our larger cattle producers.
When we're buying hay on some of these bigger farms I consult on, I make them send the numbers.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't test where it needs to be, we don't buy.
No.
And, that's, to me, let's say if going rate, let's look at a square bale. Let's say a square bale's $8 a bale. I'm just going to make up some random numbers here.
Sure.
If your TDN is really high, your digestibility is fantastic, your protein's up there, it's worth it to pay $10 or $11 for that bale of hay because you're getting more value from it.
You're not having to buy as much. And you're not having to buy as much feed or something else to supplement that hay with.
Because if you get good quality forage, your feed bill, I promise you, will go down.
Oh, 100%.
It's going to go down.
How do you think I can afford to have the amount of horses I have?
That's it. I mean, you got quality hay.
I was having to buy feed for all of that. Then, yep.
And so I think as consumers, if when you're buying hay, if the more of us that ask for a hay test, the more common that will be.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's something definitely as horse owners we can drive is like, what's the hay test? And like I said, anybody that grows hay, it's easy to get.
Absolutely.
And if you're buying large quantities, if you're, I got some people that have got 2 horses and they're going to go out and buy 200 bales. They're going to buy hay. They got a place to store it. I tell them, I was like, before you buy it, test it.
Yeah.
Like tell the producer, like, I want to test this. Now hold these bales for me. I want to test this. And if it tests, I'm going to buy it.
So 5 to 7 business days would typically have your result.
Yeah.
So, just
test it. And if you've got questions of whether it's good hay, oh, wait a minute, what can we do?
Oh, call your local county agent.
Call your local county agent.
Man.
So, Lucy, thanks for being here today. I want to wrap a few things up.
Sure.
Like, let's talk about order of importance. 1, make a phone call.
Yep, absolutely.
Test. Test your soil.
Test your soil.
Your hay. Walk your fields. Don't be afraid to not know what you've got out there because, again, your tax dollars at work, county extension agents can help you figure out what you got and what you don't have.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to not know the questions to ask. Like I get a lot of people that call and say, hey, I'm doing this for the first time. I don't know where to start. And that's my job is to help you figure out where to start.
Yes.
So.
When I started playing in a garden, I had farmed, but I'd never gardened. I don't know how many times I had you out there.
Yeah, but you did a great job. You've got a much greener.
I'll tell you a funny story about the agents. I remember the first few years I was gardening. I can't do anything small, and I was starting seeds, and I was like, okay, well, I'm only getting like a 50% germination rate, so I've got to plant. I've got to start 200 seeds if I want 50 tomato plants. And so I called Miss Lucy. She's like, oh, let me get the vegetable specialist out there. Well, he comes out and he looks at him starting seeds, and he's like, what are you doing? Like, no, don't do that. So he goes through me on how to start seeds. So the next year, in fact, that year he even told me, he's like, I see these seedlings. The best thing you can do is throw those things away and start up. That's how bad this was. You're like, just dump these and just start over. So the next year I started seeds. And again, I was working on this 50% success rate. Well, I did it Bob's way. I was giving away tomato plants. I started 200 tomato seeds, and I'm over there like, what do I do with all these tomatoes? So again, call your agent. For those of you listening, like I said, it doesn't matter where you're listening at least in the U.S., and we got a lot out of the country listeners as well. But if you're in the U.S., pick up the phone, call your extension agent, and that's the great thing. If they don't have the answer, they can go all the way up to the big dogs at the university.
Absolutely.
They can actually reach out to other universities. Like there may be the expert of the world in this is at the University of Tennessee. They can make that phone call.
Absolutely. We're a pretty close-knit network.
Yep. So thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We've, I know it's a little different. It wasn't necessarily medicine, but again, I do believe food is medicine. And the better nutrition we provide our horses, the better they're going to be in the long run.
Absolutely.
And nutrition starts with the soil.
And if you're going to have horses, you need to know everything about the entire management plan.
Exactly.
So Thank you for putting this together.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Everybody, thanks for listening. Keep sending your questions. We're going to keep working through topics. Like I said, we have got a long list, and we are trying to get to everything. But again, we do still have real jobs, so we don't get to sit around and podcast all day. So thanks for being here, April. Thanks for filming as always. Casey, thanks for editing and making this not sound stupid. And we look forward.
A lot of work to do there with me.
So we look forward to seeing y'all again. Y'all take care. Thanks. Bye.